In the first part of our series on the fall of Singapore, we explored the factors that led to the conflict, including Singapore's strategic location, British colonial rule, and pre-war tensions in Asia. We examined the battle and Japanese landings, air operations, and the events that transpired on the second day. The British forces struggled to adapt to the challenges posed by their determined adversaries as the Japanese forces continued their rapid advance. In this second part of the series, we will delve into the Japanese breakthrough and the collapse of the British defences, as well as key events like the tragic Alexandra Hospital Massacre. We will then discuss the final days of the battle, the British surrender, and the Japanese occupation of Singapore. Finally, we will examine the aftermath of these events, exploring the long-term effects on Singapore and the region, as well as their impact on the course of World War II, providing valuable insights into the factors that have shaped the region's contemporary landscape. Japanese breakthrough. The Japanese breakthrough during the Battle of Singapore can be largely attributed to the collapse of the British defensive efforts. The British forces, already weakened by the loss of crucial resources and personnel in earlier battles, were ill-prepared to counter the swift and relentless Japanese advance. The British military was hampered by poor coordination and communication, inadequate equipment, and a lack of understanding of the terrain. Additionally, the British underestimated the fighting capabilities of the Japanese forces, having assumed that their own superior numbers and firepower would be sufficient to deter the enemy. This miscalculation ultimately contributed to the British defensive collapse. The Japanese forces, on the other hand, led by General Tomoyuki Yamashita, employed a range of innovative tactics and strategies that proved to be highly effective against the British defenders. Utilizing their knowledge of the local terrain, the Japanese were able to outmaneuver the British by conducting rapid and stealthy advances through the Malayan jungle. The use of bicycles allowed the Japanese troops to move quickly and cover large distances, further enhancing their mobility. They also employed psychological warfare, creating a sense of confusion and panic among the British troops. This was achieved by deploying infiltration tactics, engaging in night attacks, and using loudspeakers to broadcast demoralizing messages. These tactics served to break the morale of the British defenders, making them more vulnerable to the relentless Japanese onslaught. Japanese army focused on capturing key strategic locations, which played a crucial role in their successful breakthrough. One of the most significant locations was the island of Pulau Ubin, situated at the entrance of the Johor Strait. The Japanese used the island as a base to launch amphibious attacks on the main island of Singapore. By doing so, they were able to bypass the British defences at the Johor Causeway, which was heavily fortified. Additionally, they swiftly captured airfields and other critical infrastructure, including Tengah Airfield and the naval base in Sembawang. By seizing these vital locations, they gained control over the air and sea routes, effectively cutting off the British forces' access to reinforcements and supplies. This strategy of rapid capture and control of key strategic locations proved to be a decisive factor in the Japanese victory during the Battle of Singapore. You know, war brings blood. There were many events in this war that prove it. This bloody battle witnessed one of the most ruthless massacres in history, Alexandra Hospital Massacre. The Alexandra Hospital Massacre was a harrowing event that occurred on February 14, 1942. As the Japanese forces advanced relentlessly towards the city, the British and Commonwealth troops found themselves retreating towards the Alexandra Military Hospital. The hospital, already overwhelmed with wounded soldiers, was struggling to provide care under the intense pressure of the ongoing battle. Unbeknownst to the hospital staff and patients, the Japanese Imperial Army was closing in on their position. The confusion and chaos of the retreat, combined with the Japanese forces' drive to swiftly capture strategic locations, set the stage for the tragic events that were about to unfold. On February 14th, Japanese soldiers entered the Alexandra Military Hospital and began an indiscriminate killing spree. They bayoneted patients lying in their beds, murdered medical personnel, and gunned down the unarmed and injured. The brutality was beyond imagination, with some accounts detailing patients being killed in the middle of surgery. The massacre continued into the following day when additional Japanese troops arrived and executed more patients and staff members, including those who had been taken prisoner. In total, it is estimated that more than 200 people, including doctors, nurses, and wounded soldiers, were brutally killed during the massacre. It had a profound and lasting impact on the morale of the British forces and the civilian population in Singapore. The news of the atrocities spread quickly, further demoralizing the already dispirited British troops who had been struggling to hold their defensive lines against the Japanese onslaught. For the civilian population, the massacre was a horrifying reminder of the brutality of war and the ruthlessness of the Japanese forces. It also signaled the impending fall of Singapore and the beginning of a brutal occupation that would leave a lasting scar on the city and its people. The massacre highlighted the desperate situation faced by the British forces and underscored the urgent need for surrender to prevent further bloodshed. Fall of Singapore. In the final days of this bloody battle, the British forces were in complete disarray, having suffered significant losses and facing imminent defeat. The relentless Japanese assault had led to the rapid disintegration of the British defences, leaving the troops demoralised and fatigued. British and Commonwealth soldiers fought fiercely, but their efforts were undermined by poor communication, inadequate supplies, and a lack of cohesive leadership. As the Japanese continued to capture key strategic locations, they tightened the noose around the remaining British forces, leaving them little choice but to consider surrendering to save the city and its civilian population from further destruction and suffering. On February 15, 1942, realizing that further resistance was futile, British General Arthur Percival formally surrendered to Japanese General Tomoyuki Yamashita. The fall of Singapore marked the largest capitulation in British military history, with approximately 80,000 British, Indian, and Australian troops taken as prisoners of war. The Japanese occupation of Singapore began immediately, and the island was renamed Sionanto, meaning Light of the South in Japanese. The occupation was characterized by strict military rule, harsh punishments, and widespread scarcity of resources. During the occupation, the Japanese authorities implemented a series of policies aimed at consolidating their control over the island. These included the forced relocation of the local population, the establishment of a puppet government, and the suppression of any form of resistance. The Japanese also targeted specific ethnic groups, particularly the Chinese, for persecution and mass executions in what became known as the Sook Ching massacre. The fall of Singapore had immediate and far-reaching consequences for all parties involved. For the British, the loss of Singapore was a significant blow to their prestige and military reputation, shattering the myth of British invincibility. The defeat also exposed the vulnerability of the British Empire and its colonial possessions, further weakening its global influence. The Japanese, on the other hand, celebrated the victory as proof of their military prowess and evidence of the superiority of the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, which sought to unite Asia under Japanese leadership. For the local population, the consequences were devastating. The occupation brought immense suffering as people faced severe food shortages, forced labor, and the arbitrary brutality of the Japanese regime. The people of Singapore were subjected to daily hardships and indignities, which left deep scars on the collective memory of the nation. The fall of Singapore marked the beginning of a dark chapter in the island's history, one that would have lasting repercussions on its political, social, and economic fabric. Aftermath. The long-term effects of the fall of Singapore and the subsequent Japanese occupation were profound, both for Singapore and the wider region. The defeat undermined the credibility of British colonial rule and exposed the vulnerability of the European powers in Asia. This fueled nationalist movements across the region, eventually leading to the independence of many countries from their colonial masters. For Singapore, the occupation and its aftermath laid the groundwork for the development of a strong national identity, a sense of resilience, and a determination to forge its own path towards self-governance and economic prosperity. And also, it had a significant impact on the course of World War II, particularly in the Pacific theater. The Japanese victory boosted their morale and encouraged further expansion, leading to the capture of Burma, the Philippines, and the Dutch East Indies. However, the the rapid expansion overstretched Japan's military resources, which ultimately contributed to their defeat by the Allied forces. The loss of Singapore also led to a strategic reassessment by the British and other Allied powers, who recognized the need to shift resources and focus to the Pacific theater in order to counter the growing Japanese threat. Its legacy continues to resonate in the collective memory of the nation and serves as a reminder of the importance of national defense and self-reliance. The lessons learned from the British defeat and the subsequent occupation have informed Singapore's approach to defense, diplomacy, and nation-building. The events of 1942 also serve as a cautionary tale of the dangers of complacency, underestimating one's adversaries, and over-reliance on external powers for protection. In the wider context, the fall of Singapore is a stark reminder of the brutality of war and the importance of maintaining peace and stability in the region. In our videos about the fall of Singapore, we explored the captivating events surrounding the lead-up to and eventual British capitulation to the Japanese forces in February 1942. Through our engaging video content, we brought to life the key battles, strategic decisions, and harrowing experiences faced by soldiers and civilians alike, showcasing the profound impact and enduring legacy of the fall of Singapore on the nation and the wider region. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more fascinating historical content.